Welcome to Honeybee, real stories of love, lies, and betrayal, where every truth stings. Let's begin. My name is Jeremy, and let me tell you this. Nothing crushes you harder than realizing the life you thought you were building was nothing but an illusion. I've been working construction for years, doing everything I could provide for my wife, Victoria, and our 3-year-old child. But slowly, I started noticing changes in her behavior. Whenever I had a day off or came home earlier than usual, Victoria would always find some reason to rush out. Sometimes it was groceries, other times a last-minute meetup with friends, or some so-called work errand. It didn't matter what the excuse was. What stood out was how quickly she'd grab her keys and bolt, like she couldn't stand being under the same roof with me. At first, I tried to brush it off. She worked freelance, so her schedule was flexible. Maybe she just preferred working outside the house. I told myself, but the more I paid attention, the less sense it made. Most of her work was remote, and there weren't any big deadlines that required her to be out that often. Even when she wasn't working, she'd still come up with a reason to leave. Eventually, the pattern became impossible to ignore. I started wondering, if she was this restless when I was around, what was happening when I wasn't home? I began paying closer attention. Her quick errands sometimes lasted hours. When I asked where she'd been, her answers were vague. And if I dared ask a second time, she'd get annoyed, like I was accusing her of something. That's when I knew something wasn't right. Instead of blowing up, I decided to test her. Sometimes, the best way to see someone's true character is to give them the chance to reveal it. One evening, I sat her down and told her what should have been devastating news. I told her I'd lost my job. And to make it worse, I said a bad investment had wiped out our savings. No backup plan. No safety net. Nothing. In reality, our savings were fine. She just didn't know that. I wanted to see how my wife would react when she thought the man who provided for her suddenly had nothing left to give. Her reaction? Ice cold. Not a hint of worry. No words of encouragement. No, we'll figure this out together. She just stared at me and said, "So, what do you want me to do about it?" I sat there stunned. She wasn't worried about me. She was worried about how this would affect her. She muttered about how hard things would be for her and our child, not once asking how I was holding up. That was all I needed to know. From that moment on, everything changed. The second she believed I was broke, she stopped pretending altogether. She started talking down to me, like I'd lost all value in her eyes. She came and went as she pleased, barely telling me where she was going. Coming home at odd hours, no explanations given. And when she was home, it was like I didn't exist, unless she needed something for our child. I decided to keep playing along. I told her that since I was out of work, we have to rely on her freelance income to cover the house expenses. The look on her face said it all. She hated the idea. But what choice did she have? Some days she'd hand over money. Other days she'd claim she had none, which I knew was a lie because she was still buying new clothes and getting her hair done. And whenever she did contribute, she made sure I paid for it emotionally. She nagged constantly, made me feel like a burden, and exploded over the smallest things. The house not being spotless, our child being too loud, me asking a question at the wrong time. She even started snapping at our kid, something she'd never done before. That's when I knew for sure she never saw me as an equal. In her mind, my worth began and ended with what I could provide. So I stayed quiet. I let her keep believing I was down and out. I let her reveal her true self, day after day. And every single day, she made it clearer she never really loved me. She only loved what I could give her. Months later, after all the coldness, the late nights, the dismissive stares, she sat me down and said she was pregnant. And then, like she was talking about the weather, she added, "But it's not yours." She said it so casually, like it was no big deal. She assumed I'd be desperate enough to accept whatever she threw at me just to keep the family together. She was wrong. I stared at her for a long moment, then slowly smirked. "That's funny," I said. She frowned, confused at why I find this funny. That's when I reached into the drawer, pulled out a plain white envelope, and slid it across the table. "Open it," I told her. Inside were the results of a paternity test. Our 3-year-old wasn't mine either. I watched the color drain from her face as she read it. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. I leaned forward, my voice calm, almost amused. So let me get this straight. You thought you could tell me you're pregnant with another man's kid, and I'd just accept it? Meanwhile, you had me raising a child that isn't even mine? She stammered, trying to explain, but I cut her off. You know what's even funnier? I stood up. I was already planning to leave in less than a week. My company secured a new overseas contract. Her head snapped up. What do you mean? I mean I'm done. I'd already been preparing to leave before you confessed. Now you just made it easier. Panic flashed in her eyes. Wait, what about me? What about our child? I chuckled. Take him to his real father. You're an adult. Figure it out. Her face crumbled. She realized too late that she destroyed everything. The very next morning, she tried to undo it all. It was almost pathetic. The cold, distant wife I'd endured for months was suddenly warm and sweet, smiling, offering me coffee, even reaching for my hand. But I wasn't fooled. This wasn't love. It wasn't regret. It was fear. She didn't care about losing me. She cared about losing the life I provided. She knew her new baby's father wasn't going to step up, so she turned back the man she'd disrespected, lied to, and cheated on for years. She brought up old memories, told me she made a mistake, claimed she let stress get the better of her. She said our family was worth saving, but I had already seen the truth. If I'd really been broke, she wouldn't be acting like this now. She only cared because she realized I had something she didn't want to lose, financial security. She cried, begged, said she couldn't raise 2 kids alone. But she didn't want me. She wanted my stability, my protection, my resources. I had no intention of letting her trap me again. She thought she had a week to convince me to stay, but in reality, my flight was only 2 days away. I had already tied up every loose end, booked my tickets, secured my documents. The night before my flight, while she was sleeping, I quietly packed what little I had left. I'd already been taking my things bit by bit over the past few days. No goodbye, no fight, no last words. I took one last look at that house, a house that was supposed to be a home but had become a prison, and walked out the door. When the plane lifted off the runway, for the first time in months, I felt free. Victoria had lied, cheated, disrespected me, and taken me for granted. And for months, I had to pretend to be broken. But the truth was, she was the one who had no future without me. As the city disappeared beneath me, I let out a slow, steady breath. I wasn't angry. I didn't wish her harm. I just didn't care anymore. And that was my victory, indifference. I leaned back in my seat, staring out at the open sky. No baggage, no chains, no weight pulling me down. I wasn't just leaving Victoria. I was leaving behind the version of myself who once thought love meant sacrificing dignity. That man was gone, and I wasn't looking back. To any man stuck in the same situation I was in, hear me. Stop arguing. Stop begging. Stop wasting your breath trying to prove your worth. A woman who doesn't respect you will never love you. If she comes back, it's not because she suddenly values you. It's because she's scared of losing what you provide. The biggest mistake a man can make is building his entire existence around someone who would replace him the second life gets hard. When Victoria thought I was broke, that's when her true colors came out. And that's when I learned the most important lesson of my life. Love that only exists when you're useful isn't love. It's a transaction. And once you see it for what it is, you stop trying to convince her to stay. So plan. Get your finances in order. Protect yourself. Move in silence. And when the time comes, just leave. No warnings, no emotional speeches. Because the moment you show you can live without her, that's when she'll suddenly want to fight for the marriage. But by then, it won't matter. You'll already be gone. I didn't get revenge. I didn't need it. My freedom was the only victory I needed. And there's nothing sweeter than walking away with your dignity, leaving her behind with nothing but regret.